these energies are often personified. Not all energies are personified, but in this case we have the Lord accompanied by his energies, so his energies were personified in certain forms like Shri and Pushti, Kirti and Aja, etc. And energy means Shakti. Shakti means an expression of the Lord to do certain things. How does the Lord do his activities? How does he manifest his form? How does he manifest the spiritual world? So he does this by his energies. He has various powers by which he can do this, and often these energies take the form of persons who are like servants. So the energy actually is a servant of the Lord. The Shakti means that it is controlled by the Supreme Lord, Shaktiman. So it's natural that these Shaktis could take a personal form of being a servant. And we see that these Shaktis, of course, are feminine in form. The weapons, on the other hand, are not feminine in form, but we find the Shaktis are feminine in form, just like we have the Prakriti represented by Durga Devi, or Lakshmi representing Hladini Shakti, or Radha representing Hladini Shakti. So these are all female in form, and they manifest various powers in the Lord, such as his own beauty and his own fame, etc. And as Prabhupada explains in the purport, these energies extend even to the jivas in the material world and in the spiritual world. So in the spiritual world, of course, jivas have qualities quite similar to the Lord, though in small quantity. So they all have beauty, they all have good qualities, etc. So at the same time, we find in the material world, devatas are empowered by the Lord. They are called vibhutis of the Lord. They're not avatars, nor are they Shaktivesh avatars, but still, though they have material bodies, they are favored by the Lord, so they get special powers. So you can say they're Shakti of the spiritual world, also manifest to some degree in these jivas in the material world. And in this way they can perform their functions in a very special way as devatas and creators of the material world. So the Lord expands his energies throughout the spiritual world and throughout the material world. Of course, we can also say in the material world a lot of the Shakti is reflective. So we have Durga Devi as a dull reflection of the spiritual Shakti of Lakshmi or Radha in the spiritual world. She doesn't have exactly the same function, but nevertheless she has some powers to manifest things. We have bliss in the spiritual world, and we have material happiness in the material world, so it's not exactly the same thing. It's a dull reflection of what's in the spiritual world. Similarly, we have knowledge in the spiritual world. We have knowledge in the material world. But the knowledge in the material world is contaminated. It is covered, not spiritual. So the chit function operates, but in a slightly different way. So in all cases, all of these are manifestations of the Lord's powers. So originally, of course, the energies are spiritual. And therefore, we often describe the Lord with his three types of energy, the Sandhini Shakti, Samvit Shakti, and Hladini Shakti. And then we have these subdivisions where we get all these different forms like Pushti, Shri, Kirti, Aja, etc. So they're all subdivisions of the main types of energy. And they act to please the Lord in the spiritual world and support the pastimes in the spiritual world. For instance, we have some functional Shaktis like the Leela Shakti. So this helps Krishna accomplish his different pastimes and create astonishment within those pastimes, such that even Krishna gets astonished. We have the Yoga Maya potency, which hides some of the knowledge of the jivas, even though they should have perfect knowledge in the spiritual world. It gets covered over for certain purposes in performance of pastimes. So that is the function of yogamaya. So they may forget, they may not be aware of things. So it's a spiritual ignorance for producing pastimes and bliss in the spiritual world. In the spiritual world, we also have an Aishvarya Shakti, by which Krishna manifests his powers. And of course, Krishna usually doesn't want to manifest his powers to the people of Vrindavan. But we see in the case of Mother Yasoda, when Krishna ate some dirt and the Mother Yasoda looked in his mouth, Aishvarya Shakti operated and showed the whole universe within Krishna. So that was a manifestation of his Aishvarya Shakti. And then Yasoda became very astonished by that. So in this way, the energies in the spiritual world act to enhance and assist the Lord in all of his different pastimes. And this creates bliss. So not only in Goloka, but in all of the planets in the spiritual world, we have a Vishnu with his expansion. So here we have Mahavishnu with the Shakti expansions with him. And through this, he manifests his beauty, his qualities, his powers, etc. Mahavishnu, however, is a form of Paramatma. He is the Paramatma feature is a witness of certain things. So he is the witness of everything within Prakriti. Garbhodaya Vishnu is the witness within one universe, within the whole of Prakriti. And Kshirodaksha is the witness within each jiva, within each universe. So in this way, Paramatma expands in a more and more particular way until he gets to Kshirodaksha Vishnu, which he is inside each jiva. But in general, we have Mahavishnu with the whole of Prakriti, glancing over the whole of Prakriti. So he is the first expansion because he is the initial person in charge of the material world, and he's the one that glances over Prakriti to cause it to manifest the worlds. We also see the description of how the universes emanate from Mahavishnu, and they're all like small particles of air in relation to the lattice work of a window, and they're like coming out of the pores of his body, like air goes through the lattice work of the windows. So, in other words, Mahavishnu is huge in comparison to any universe. So, though from our point of view the universe is unimaginably huge, from the point of Mahavishnu they're infinitesimal, like little molecules. So that is why we have a huge description here of Mahavishnu residing on this huge ocean, on the Ananta Shesha. And Arjuna saw this huge form. Naturally, he would be very astonished by this form and give it great respect. So this is one form of the Lord. It's the same form as the form in the spiritual world in Mahavaikuntha. The only difference is that Mahavishnu is functional. In the spiritual world, Mahavishnu, his only function, we can say, is to have pastimes with his devotees. The function of Mahavishnu is not to have pastimes with devotees, but to manifest the material world and preside over it. So this is a functional aspect, and therefore we don't find the same extent of qualities manifesting in him because he doesn't have intimate relationships with all sorts of devotees as he does in the Mahavaikuntha in the spiritual world. So therefore we distinguish Paramatma from Bhagavan because the relationship is less obvious with Mahavishnu. So his relationship is with the jivas, of course, because he deposits the jivas within Prakriti, and this causes the first transformation of Prakriti into Mahatattva. And then, of course, through his expansions, ultimately he witnesses each jiva through Kshirodakshayi Vishnu. So he has a relationship, but it's not the same relationship as we have between the devotees of the Lord and the Supreme Lord. Therefore, we don't have many devotees starting a relationship with Mahavishnu. Instead, if they have a relationship, he becomes Vishnu in the spiritual world instead of this Paramatma feature. So, nevertheless, he is the Supreme Lord. He's non-different from that other Lord, but he's a functional aspect of the Lord. So therefore, we say that the Lord has these different aspects: Bhagavan, Paramatma, and Brahman. Brahman, however, is a little different because no qualities manifest there, no Shaktis, or minimum of Shaktis manifest. And therefore, even though we can say Brahman is also Sat Chidananda, the Sat and Chit aspects are minimal, and the Sat aspect is predominant there. So it's quite different from even Paramatma. Thus, Jiva Goswami doesn't have a Sandarbha dedicated to Brahman because he can't really talk about it. It has no qualities, no form. There's what to say about it. However, Paramatma does have a lot of power and function, etc. So then he has one Sandarbha dedicated to Paramatma. Of course, it is not too big. It is quite small compared to the Bhagavat Sandarbha. And so Bhagavan has more qualities. So therefore, we have a much bigger Sandarbha dedicated to Bhagavan. So in this way, Arjuna and Krishna saw this Paramatma feature Mahavishnu, and they were very awed by it. Of course, Krishna is ultimately supreme and greater than Mahavishnu, but he is playing a role here of being an ordinary king in the material world or whatever like that. That simultaneously, obviously, is not, because he can go outside the universe with Arjuna and show him this form. So he is Supreme Lord, but still, we see that in the next verse he offers his respects to this Mahavishnu form, who's very huge. So natural because of that huge form of Mahavishnu. In spite of the fact that Bhagavan is superior to Paramatma, we find that Krishna, who is Swayam Bhagavan, is offering his respects to Mahavishnu, which creates a little bit of a confusion for Arjuna also, and that's explained later. How is it that this can take place? How can Krishna offer respects to this person or whatever? How is it that he's the Supreme Lord but he can't come to Dwarka, etc.? So these questions will be resolved later on.